Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Let's Talk Parks. Today, I am talking with Art Thatcher from BerryDunn. Art is a manager here in the Parks, Recreation, and Libraries practice, and today we are talking about implementation. So, Art, good morning, and thank you for being on the show.
Hi, good morning, Becky. Thank you. Very excited to be here and share some opportunities with you and the listeners.
Awesome. I know you've been doing this for quite some time. I am excited to talk about implementation because I feel like the work that we do in terms of creating the master plan or strategic plan is certainly important. And the process itself can be very informative and helpful for bringing staff and the community on board with your plan, and being involved with it, I think, is valuable in and of itself. But of course, we create a plan so that they can actually be implemented and that we see success from it. And so today we're focusing on implementation. And we recently released an article from our newsletter. And so you can sign up for a newsletter if you haven't received that yet. But it goes over the 6 steps of successful Parks and Recreation Master Plan implementation. So we're going to go over those 6 steps today. But Art, what are just some things we should be thinking about? Let's say that you're a director or you've been heavily involved in the process. Kind of what should we be thinking about as we prepare for those 6 steps of implementation?
Well, I think the biggest thing and the reason that I see this as very important is that in most cases, we have spent 10, 12, in some cases 18 months, putting this whole plan together, getting it through adoption, getting it through administration and then through the governing body to adopt it. And at that point, as a director and as a department, you're ready to go, it's done. Yeah. We did it. But at that point this is where the work really begins. That was just the development phase. And now this implementation phase is the meat of the plan. It's what happened. We've cooked Thanksgiving dinner and now we need to serve it to everybody. And so, that's why I like this portion of it. And even though we're not as engaged with communities, we still, when we finish a project, we still do some implementation and then some follow up with many of our clients as they see fit.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to know it's like there is a lot involved with doing the plan, and I can imagine the sigh of relief when it's completed. And yet, as you say, the work is just beginning. So let's talk about step number 1, which is embedding the plan. So what do you mean by embedding the plan?
So as part of our master planning process, we develop an action table. So it really is it goes through and looks at the goals for the master plan, objectives, and then action steps. And so by embedding, what we mean is that the staff, the leadership, really, at this point, needs to assign staff members as champions for these action steps. And so, making sure that as we go through the process or as the department is developing their annual, strategic plan, their annual, work plan for their individuals, that the master plan action steps are part of that. So it's embedded in when you do new employee orientation, you give them the executive summary of the master plan. So they see, how we got there and then what those action steps are that the department is leading. So they know the direction, making sure that the community, once we finish, the community would like to know what's happening. So making sure that the community has availability to at least the executive summary, and if not the entire document. One of the things that we've been doing recently is making a less formal final document so that it's not as cumbersome, it's not as word heavy, it's more visual, and it's more appealing to the general public as well as the staff. I mean, they don't want to read a 150-page document. They'd like to be able to, look and see what's the meat of it and how we go. So, making sure that strategic direction is put out there, not only to staff, but also to the community. And then, making sure that, at least all of your division heads or your supervisors have copies of that action table, so that they are able to, refer to it on a regular basis. And an example that I'll use, I had one of my project managers in Florida, in Martin County, had told me at a conference a couple of years after we had provided the master plan to him, is that he, not only puts it in all of the staff's work plans, but the other thing that he does is when they make requests to city council, he always refers to the master plan. So in goal A, objective C, action item C 1.4 in the council adopted master plan, and then the action, so that council knows, oh yeah, this is part of what we agreed to 3 years ago. This, it's not just something that the director came up with or staff came up with. It's following that progress. So it is embedded in kind of everything that they do so that it makes sense, and the community and the elected officials and the administration are aware of where the department is coming from.
That makes sense. And I really appreciate those examples too. And it's so important to be able to clearly articulate in front of council what those priorities are. And that master plan was created for that. So being able to refer to that makes a lot of sense. But oftentimes if it's out of sight, it's out of mind. And so I really appreciate kind of the visuals of, making sure you have printed copies. I had a client in Evergreen that talked about how they printed out the action plan and it's on their whiteboard right next to their desk. So it's present and it's top of mind. So that makes a lot of sense. Now you talked about having a champion, and I think that goes to that second step as well, which is that conquer and divide step. So talk a little bit more about that and the importance of having champions for your projects.
Well, and so we know that you can't do everything yourself. As the director or even as the administrative team, you can't do everything yourself. And so, we recommend that as they divide up, as they make this action plan, as they, put it into their annual work plan, that they find champions for each one of the actions that they're going to try and accomplish during that year or over the next 5 years. And, and when I say champion, it's not just assigned to somebody, hey, John, this is your project. You're going to do this. You need to make sure that it is somebody who is passionate about that piece of work, who is going to stay on top of it and going to, when they talk about it, you can tell the way they talk about it, that they're enthusiastic about it and not, oh, hey guys, we got to do, action item, 1 of C. It's like, hey guys, this year our goal is to update, all of our signage throughout the park. We've got funding for it. So that's going to be what we're going to do this year. And, and then be able to start assigning that to other members of their team. And so that's that kind of divide and conquer, making sure that one, you're finding those champions. Again, as you develop the work plan, putting those champions' names to that work plan so they're accountable. So that at the end of the year or, the quarterly review of the work plan, those phases, you can look at John and say, where are we? And are there barriers that we're not further along? So, it keeps both the department as well as the staff accountable to the actions and to that implementation.
That makes a lot of sense. And I also appreciate the fact that when your staff is involved in the process, then they're also probably invested in the success of those action items. And so it makes perfect sense for them to become champions, and the importance of them being enthusiastic and excited to bring that forward is certainly important. Let's talk about, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, and I mean, that's a great point. And one of the things in like our process for developing the master plan is that we engage staff at the very beginning and then throughout the process. So, at the end, they're not handed a document or an action table or here's your assignment and go, oh, well, what's this all about? They've had input from the very beginning. We start with that SWOT, and then, we engage them through the process. They help us, look at that visioning piece of it. And then they have a chance to review the draft goals and objectives and recommendations. So they've been involved. So it's easy through that process to find those champions who have been involved and who have been part of that process to take on that responsibility. They're willing to do it at that point, as opposed to being assigned, this is what you've got to do. But, I've been involved. That's what I want to do. That's my division. Let me take it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So this next step number 3 of 6 is all about reporting and formatting. So, and you talk about, having a spreadsheet or having some sort of software to track those things. What have you seen some of our clients do in terms of tracking progress?
So one of the simplest things, and you mentioned it earlier, is they take the action table and they either put it on a whiteboard or they print it out on white paper and put it on their board, or each one of whichever divisions got whichever goals, they put those up so that they can refer to them on a regular basis and they see them, and it's just like their mission. It's up there. It's something that they can look at. It's something that they can refer to on a regular basis. And the other, again, is, we have already given them the action table. And so we can provide that, or, have provided that in an Excel sheet so they can add columns to it, because we have, the action and then the operational impacts, the capital impacts, and then the timetable. So they can just add columns to the side of that of who's responsible, and then, quarterly updates on it. And I recommend, quarterly updates as opposed to, updating annually. That way you're not, it's kind of like when you're in local government and you get your performance appraisal, instead of at the end of the year finding out where you are, if you meet quarterly, where you are, and you can course correct. You can get additional resources if you need them to make it happen, those type things. It's the same with this implementation. If you do these quarterly check-ins, see how things are doing, see how staff are doing, see how it's coming along, you're setting yourself up for more success. And then at the end of the year, it is when you do that annual report. You do that report on, this is what we've accomplished this year. And so you can, give that to the community. You can give that to your elected officials. It's part of your budgeting process. This is what we accomplished. This is what we want to accomplish the next year. So it's celebrating your own successes. And we're the worst at celebrating our successes. We're really good at getting stuff done, but celebrating that once we've done it is, we're not as good at. And so doing this quarterly, doing an annual, makes it easier to accomplish that.
I love that. And I think celebrating those accomplishments is something that we need to make more time for. And it also sounds related to step number 4, which is around telling the master plan story. So tell us a little bit more about that step in the process, the importance of it, and what that actually looks like.
Yeah. And it really rolls into, what I was just talking about those, there's regular quarterly, semi-annual meetings with staff to review the progress and to, and to celebrate those at the end of the year, putting together that annual report so that you can give that to everybody in the department so they can see what you've accomplished within the city administration, your elected officials, and then also out to the community. You can also at that point, once you've celebrated, you can look at, well, what's our next, what are we going to do next year? How can what we've accomplished this year feed into, our next year's operations and capital and those things. And then the other thing, I talked about citizens, but, every community's got their major stakeholders. They've got the youth athletic leagues, they've got the art commission, they've got, the annual walking club and the senior citizen club. So they can report out to them. They can, those stakeholders you can give them the annual report, and then they become your next set of cheerleaders, beyond your staff. The best voices in the community for celebrating your success are other community members. I remember a city manager, when I first got started in the industry, that told me, Art, you're supposed to tell me great things and you're supposed to, make things happen. But when a citizen walks in and says exactly what you said, it carries 10 times the weight because they're actually living what you have done. And so I pay you to do that. They don't get paid, but they're telling me that you're doing a great job. So, I think that's why if we can get those champions in the community and those stakeholders to, also be aware of what we're doing and not just, oh, well, what did the department do this year? It's just it's a greater impact.
Yeah. And that reminds me of something that one of our clients did. They actually had a 1-year strategic plan update, and they held a public meeting, and they invited all of their stakeholders that were involved in the process and let them know the progress. And to me, it was incredible. It was like something over 50% of all of the items that they had outlined for the entire plan, which is a 1 to 3 year strategic plan, had already been completed. I'm like, that is incredible. And that's the story that you need to tell. It was anytime that you're inviting the public to assess your progress on something, it takes a bit of courage and a bit of, preparation to that, right? You want to make sure that you have the progress behind that. But to me, that's a great example of accountability and bringing people into the process and transparency as well. So awesome. Well, let's get into step number 5, which is to monitor and revise the master plan. Tell us about it.
Well, again, that all kind of goes back to like that chart on the wall or your action table. And so you can, as you're looking at your progress towards the different action steps and you're noting your progress, there are going to be times when you run into a roadblock. Your champion, was cruising along and some local community just snagged them away from you. And so, we've got to find somebody else to fill that. So, so there's going to be that lull. And so as as you continue to monitor and to keep track of the progress on these, it's easy to kind of put a hold on that or to find somebody else to help with that, as opposed to it just falling off the radar, when that champion leaves. And so I think keeping up with that, making sure that it is a kind of a living document and not just, a stagnant document. As staff see changes, if like we've done projects in the Treasure Valley of Idaho, and it is one of the fastest growing areas in the country. And so I know when we did their first master plan, we had projected a 10-year population growth, and they reached that 10-year population growth in the first 3 years of the master plan implementation. And, and so, by monitoring what you're doing, you can update, and make revisions to some of those actions or reorder things that were going to be long-term, may need to be moved up to short-term because of development and opportunities that arise. So, once it's done, it's not necessarily written in stone. It can be, altered. It can be updated if your needs change and your community's needs change. And there may be some things that arise that you can stick in a parking lot so that at the end of the year, when you're looking at your next year's work plan, you can add some of those parking lot issues in if it makes sense to do those in the following year. So you're keeping track of it, making sure that it is relevant to the current time, as well as relevant, within the near term future.
Well said. I think it's important for the documents that we create to be that living document. And I think being able to recognize how that community is changing and be flexible to that is certainly important. So this last step of the process is about reviewing and renewing your master plan. So tell us about what might be in that update process that might be different from just doing maybe a master plan from the beginning.
So what we recommend and what is kind of the industry standard are, 5-year updates. And, many state, natural resource, departments, now have a requirement that you have a 5-year, current master plan. And so I know, like, the work that we do in Maryland, the LPPRP, the land preservation piece of the state, they require a 5-year master plan. And so, so it makes sense that you update those. You don't have to do the whole thing. The big piece is, because demographics change, the major piece of it is your public engagement. So doing another survey to see if if the attitude of the community is the same, has the demographic changed? I know in a lot of the California communities that we work in, and even in the Florida communities that we work in, there's a high turnover in the ethnic communities. And so they're growing. And so their need and their desire for recreation and or parks are different. And so, they may be much different than they were 5 years ago. So it gives you that chance to, again, course correct. You don't need to do a complete new inventory. You can update the inventory with, looking at capital projects and things that have been done over that 5 years. So you can update it. If you've added new playgrounds at parks, if you've, added a new picnic shelter, some of those things, those can be added in, but we don't have to go through the entire process of looking and touching, every component within the parks. That's not something that needs to be done every 5 years. And so I think those are the biggest things. Looking at your finances and your organizational structure. Has it changed? Has it changed because your workload has increased because of new programs, new facilities, those things? But the biggest piece of that is the public engagement. Looking at updating that piece, making sure you're checking in with the community, making sure that you're still on the right track and there aren't changes.
I think that it makes perfect sense. And I think especially during this time where everything seems to be changing so quickly, and demographics especially, I do a lot of work and looking at the data and seeing how communities are becoming diverse over time. And within the next 5 years, there's a lot of communities that will see significantly more Spanish-speaking population, Hispanic population, and those communities that are becoming, with those of 2 or more races, increasing over time. So that's what the data says. And I think being able to respond to that, react to that, provide more actions that align with what the community desires is something that we'll need to be aware of and respond to. So Art, I really appreciate your time today and reviewing the 6 strategies that you've outlined in this article around implementing your Parks and Recreation master plan. We talked about embedding the plan, conquering and dividing, reporting and formatting, telling the master plan story, revising the master plan as needed, and updating that and renewing that in the next 5 years. So thank you for your time today. Is there anything else you'd like to leave our listeners with? Anything that they should be thinking about as they're continuing to implement their master plans?
I think the one thing that I would say kind of in closing is that, the master plan really is a tool to make your life easier and to connect you with the community. And they help build it and they can help implement it. And so, don't be afraid of it. Use it as a tool and make the best of it. And, it is something that your elected body has adopted and has given you. And so, make sure that you use it to the best of your ability and its ability to move you and your department further in, creating great quality of life for your community.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Art, for your time today, and always good to talk to you.
Thank you, Becky. It was great to talk to you as well.
All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode with Art Thatcher from the Parks Recreation Library's practice here at BerryDunn, where we talked about implementation. And I hope this episode was valuable for you all. If you want to read that article, it's available on our website. And we also have a newsletter you can sign up for where this was also shared. I really appreciate all of you listening in, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day. And until next time, let's talk parks.